Ladies and gentlemen, many of you are enjoying my Road to Grandmaster series, which admittedly is on a bit of a pause right now, but you're enjoying watching my recaps of my over-the-board games. Well, sometimes it happens that when you start studying chess very intensely, at least as a titled player, you also have success in blitz. You have success across all the formats because you're just doing a lot of prep work, and it ends up paying off. And today I'd like to share with you some games from a recent stream that I did where I had a really successful blitz run, and I'm actually back at a record blitz rating that I have not been at in, a long time. So there's going to be 4 games. I'm going to take you through them, and yeah, I hope you enjoy. What more is there to say? So our morning begins with a matchup against an international master from Russia, who at the time of the game was rated 2,660, and I was rated 2,750. The ratings you see on the screen are, for some reason, the current live ratings of the players. I don't know why it gets pulled like that, but my opponent began with knight f3, and I played the move d5. c4, so this is a ready, and white basically wants you to decide to do what to do with this pawn in the center. You can reinforce it. You can actually take on c4, and then white will spend time winning that pawn back. Or you can play d4, which is the whole point of playing this move order, because if you play like this, you cannot fight for the center anymore because they'll just take. You have to fight with a pawn. So I play d4, and my opponent plays g3. There's 3 ways of developing here. You can attack the pawn right away, you can take like a flank approach and develop over here, or you can play g3. Now, the way I like to play this position is to play knight c6, putting a knight in front of my c-pawn, violating a rule, but time is of the essence. You want to kind of win the battle for the center. If you play c5 and then knight c6 and e5, you actually lose an important tempo. But both are actually okay. And then I take the center, we have d3. And here there's many ways to play. You can play knight f6, you can play bishop to b4, you can put this bishop on basically either of these 2 squares. You don't really want your bishop here because it can come under fire very quickly. But I like to do it like this and then play a5. So basically why I'm playing like this is that when white finally plays the move a3 and I retreat my bishop, like let's say to d6, b4, which is white's major expansion point on the queen side, is completely impossible. So I've played bishop b4, I've made white kind of mess up the development a little bit, and now a move like knight b3 makes almost no sense because you just walk right into a4, and b4 is just impossible. So white needs to really focus on e3. Or white needs to focus on kind of rerouting these knights along the light squares. So my opponent plays knight g5. It's very obvious what he's trying to do. I castle, and queen c2 is played, and here I play bishop g4. I mean, the truth is it's really hard to find like a developing plan here. On the one hand, knight e4 is coming in. On the other hand, I can just move my bishop back to e7. I'm basically waiting for e3. Like, if e3 never happens, then I will just play bishop g4, queen d7. We're going to go in here, maybe trade that light squared bishop. We're not going to hang our bishop, but you know, you get what I'm saying. So bishop g4, opponent plays knight e4. This is now protected, and I play bishop back to e7. h3, bishop f5, and here comes a very strange expansion, f4. Now that move does make sense, but when you push pawns, you are leaving many potential structural weaknesses behind you. So what I did is I just took on f4 just to see how my opponent wants to take. Is it bishop? Is it pawn? Is it rook? Opponent takes with the bishop. I play queen d7. The point of this move is to attack this and actually induce this move. I wanted this move to happen because, again, the more pawns you push, the more stuff you leave behind. And if I have one moment to crack at your structure, I'm gonna do it. And so I did it right here. I took on e4, and I made a very important pawn break in this position, which I think took over the initiative for the remainder of this game. And that pawn break is the move f5. I support that with my bishop, my queen, and my rook, and it's a really difficult move to meet. You have to take. You have to take. If you move your knight, I just take. I come in here with my bishop. It's very bad. So it takes. Now I take with the bishop. So now we have a target. We actually just, because you pushed all your pawns, you've just left the h-pawn kind of out there. However, the h-pawn is undefendable. In fact, it should not be protected at all. Because if you play something like king h2, you're simply wasting time. And I just put my feet underneath my chair and accidentally shrank my seat. You ever do that? I gotta get back up here. All right. That was a very adventurous moment of this video. Honey, I shrank the Gotham. So, king to h2 doesn't work because there's a tactical sequence of boom, and boom, and boom, and boom, and boom, and then boom, and yeah, it's based on the amount of booms, you can tell it's bad news. So, you really actually shouldn't be defending this pawn at all. you should be creating counterplay, which is really counterintuitive. He does do this, and now I immediately take. So you should not trade a bishop for the knight unless you have a really good reason. In this case, the reason is complete damage of the structure. Dark squares, we are now winning on the dark squares because white has two pieces that fight on their individual color. And this bishop is not doing anything. So now what I should do is I should trade the dark squared bishop or continue to win the battle for the dark square. So that's what I'm trying to do. E5 is a pawn sacrifice. Very interesting idea to end up opening this bishop. So sometimes when your bishops are locked behind pawns, you can sacrifice a pawn and open up their diagonals, and actually it will come in handy. I really do like this idea. Notice that I decide to try to go for this trade to try to make it knight versus bishop if this trade were to happen. Rook F1. And then here I started getting a little spooked. So I moved my king to H8. This is the top engine move to just get off of this diagonal forever. And then the couple of moves here really got me concerned. Rook B3. This move really freaked me out because I was like, oh my god, you know, remember that pawn sacrifice E5? Now you see it come alive. That bishop on G2 is completely back in the game. My pawn will be taken. Once this is taken, this is hanging, and then that's hanging. Oh my god, I mean, I can't play knight E5. Oh my god. But black is still winning. Black is still winning, but really with computer-like play. Just taking this pawn, for example. And then if something like rook takes B7 and everything is hanging, you just push D3. And then if queen takes knight, you play bishop D4 check, king to H1, and something like takes D2. Maybe findable in a long game. No human being plays that in blitz. No human being plays that in blitz. Not Hikaru, not Magnus, no human. AlphaZero, maybe. But no human being plays queen E2, D3, bishop D4. Like, you just can't see that. It's just not what's going to happen. So here I start panicking a little bit. And I play rook D8, and the opponent goes for a queen trade. And at this point, I only have one move for advantage, and it's this, which again is extremely counterintuitive, with the same idea. D3 takes rook D4. Are you going to find that with, like, 40 seconds on the clock? No, absolutely not. So the remainder of this game is unfortunately spoiled by blitz. Like, you know, I have like 35 seconds, opponent has like 20, and I end up just converting using my time advantage. My opponent ends up kind of freaking out and blundering. Like, I think right here, they blunder a tactic. They play rook C8 and just completely miscalculate, and we win the game. But it is very instructive because when we had this clamp, the pawn break was very useful. Not defending the weak pawn because of black's initiative. Instead, you know, you should just let me take the pawn and create counterplay. And the most instructive moment was the pawn break I played with F5, the bishop for knight trade, which damages the structure, me trying to trade off the dark squared attackers, so I win the battle on the dark squares. And this is a really instructive move. Just the pawn sacrifice to open up the position. And then, yeah, I mean, after that, it made the game very chaotic. So we get the win. Next opponent, I'm going by rating order. I played Young Capablanca. Don't know who this is. I imagine it's a player from Poland, given the fact that they have the Polish flag. But this guy played a very interesting thing. He played E5, which is, I don't know the full name of this opening. I don't actually, the official name. It's actually a very good line, D4, D6. The only downside to playing this move order with black is white can play here, and now you need to play the Pirtz or the modern defense. So if you have a weapon there, great. I decided to do this, and then after E5, I played knight C3. This is an edgy way to play. Edgy meaning that after it takes, like, your queen can get attacked. But I like to play like this. I actually put my queen here, and then what I'll do is I'll fianchetto my bishop on B2. So, like bishop E6, for example, I'll do something like this. And black, and actually this position's really nice. White gets a really pleasant space advantage in the center, but black can instigate A5, A4. I've had that happen to me, and position can get very hectic. So opponent plays knight F6, and actually doesn't attack my queen at all. Plays like knight D7, so I develop, I bring my queen back to D2. I didn't have to do this, but I wanted to trade off the dark squared bishop when it arrived. I mean, I could have just like castled or played F4, but I decided to do it this way, and then I got booted. And then here, G5 really surprised me because it's basically indicating that black is not going to castle this way. You cannot play like this because I have a laser beam staring at you. So I'm just going to play F3 maybe to stop this, or even H4. But F3, like, h4. Like, black is dead. It's +5. It's +5 just in this position because the attack that white is about to build up is just so strong. You're going to butcher these pawns. So when I see that, I know that, you know, something like knight g4 is going to happen. And I decide to trade bishops rather than trading bishop for knight. But black is quick. And he does a really good job here of just kind of trading off queens, trading off bishops, and actually getting the better of the opening. So what I try to do now is consolidate my structure. You'll notice we had a knight dance. I had to defend f2, but when the knight disappeared, I really didn't want to get taken. So for example, this would be horrible for white, structurally. Almost losing, because I'm winning the battle on the dark squares. I'm losing the battle on the dark squares. Knight g6, knight f4 comes in. I mean, what is my light squared bishop even fighting for? There's nothing to fight for. There's nothing to do. So I decide to go knight g1 and play f3, creating a little spike trap for the knights, so the knights can't really do much. Knight d7, knight e2, and here my opponent blunders and plays the move f5. Just a clean blunder. It happens, but it's life. And of course, if takes, just takes, but knight d4, and suddenly we are attacking an undefended bishop, and a pawn has 2 attacks on it. Okay, so we're gonna win a pawn. Fantastic. So I take on f5, bishop f7, and what's next? I mean, I just have a pawn advantage. Well, I play a move which kind of immediately gives my opponent back the initiative with this nice idea g4, which just shows how powerful the knights are. They have a nice clamp on the position, and they're, you know, they're just kind of coming in on this side of the board. And if I play something like fg, then after takes, this knight hangs, knight f2 is coming, knight e3 is coming. It's all bad news. I mean, the initiative is completely dead on my part, even though I'm a pawn up. So I have to find a way to consolidate. So I play bishop d3, and I'm, you know, after knight takes d3, rook takes d3, I've kind of consolidated, right? This is defended, that's defended. Knight e5 doesn't really scare me. I'll just probably go here. So g takes f3, g takes f3, bishop h5, and I play bishop e2. Now, if you are a tactician, you will see that after knight takes f3, this knight will lose its guard. Knight takes f3, if knight takes, then takes. If knight f3, bishop f3, takes and takes. But there's a twist. The twist is, after this, I don't take on f3, I play a Zwischenzug, in between move, knight takes d6. And now I'm a pawn up for good, and we are in the clear. So we have an endgame where the opponent has 2 major pawn weaknesses. So do I. I have f and h, but this is an asset. Okay, that pawn can be easily protected. It can be escorted down. This pawn will be scooped up. I'm going to try to get it with my knight or my rook. Now it's all about converting. Rook f8, knight d4, a6 prevents knight b5. I go here, and at this point, I begin finding a way forward. Like if I bring my king, for example, I wanted to maybe trade rooks, but it's never too late to hang your rook, so don't do that. So king c2, and here I'm like, oh, what if I kick this knight out? What if I kick this knight out, and then I can play knight e6, attacking the rook. My opponent can danger level me with rook c4, but then there's king b3, and I danger level the danger level, and now the levels are dangered, and the dangers are leveled, and there's 2 hanging rooks. And actually, that's exactly what happened. I set a trap here. Now 2 rooks are under attack. They are completely undefendable. And how do we win this position? We scoop up the pawn. Very easy way to win. Sometimes we get out in the clear like this, and you panic, and then you end up losing anyway. It's not so complicated. What you need to do is push this pawn all the way. Your rook is behind the pawn. You need to hide your king from checks, from the rook, or trade rooks. And this rook needs to go and get this knight. You just have to not lose your rook. So go get the knight out once the pawn is here, and you win. And that's exactly what I did. I tried to avoid checks, offered a couple rook trades, pushed the pawn to f7, and then played rook g3, and my opponent resigned because it's over. I mean, this is coming. Although, the game could have continued. I mean, they could have played like king d7, and if I do this, then I am stopped a bit. I'm a bit stopped. But not really, because, you know, I'll stop any checks, and then my rook will just go and try to eat everybody else. If something like rook h2, you know, rook g1, I'm constantly threatening to just kick this piece out, and it's bad. But he resigned, and we got a win over at 2800. Now is the fun part of the video. I ended my stream playing against Mishanik, who's Alexis Serrana, one of the top-rated juniors in the world. Like, I don't know his FIDE rating, but I think it's like 2680, 2670. Blitz rating frequently 3000. And I've never played him before, actually. Maybe a bullet game or something. So I decided to play a Trompowsky. After d5, I played knight d2. He went for an attack on my center, but he clarified it very quickly. He didn't keep the tension. And we got into a very early maneuvering battle. So we brought our queens out. At this point, I thought about taking on f6. I imagined that he would take my queen and something like this, a very odd transformation. But I decided, rather than doing that, let's keep some tension with knight f3, bishop d6. And he jumped in to take over the initiative. Now, at some point around here, the engine actually begins liking me taking on b6. If you're wondering why I'm not doing it, this trade often is just... it just gives black a lot of dynamics. It's really hard for me to actually take advantage of these weak pawns. And white's play here has nothing to do with the pawns. Like, the computer wants this. So it just leaves the pawns there forever. I decided not to do that, not give him what he wants. Instead, I wanted him to take me so I could get the open file. But once I saw him kind of get out of there with the queen, I was like, all right, he's going to come in with knight a5. So I decided to also get out with my queen. And he has what's known as kind of a reverse Carlsbad structure. Like, normally white is playing this structure. But so his game plan is to create a minority attack of a 3-on-4 where white has the c-pawn. And now he will play with intentions against this pawn over here. And that's exactly what he did. I mean, he played a6. He played, I played f4, trying to take a little space on the other side of the board. Now, if I play something like b4, I do kind of stop his intentions, but I really weaken myself. There's, you know, in anticipation of his intentions, I make a really massive, like, swing of my body, and now I can get caught with a different punch, right? So I let him do b5, and I even let him do b4. I let him just play all the way on that side of the board, down to this kind of situation. And I knew that this was a weakness, but of course, you know, it's a 3-minute game, so I'm like, I can just defend it. It's not really a problem, although he has outplayed me in this phase of the game. But he plays bishop e4, and right here, I kind of felt like that was not the right plan. I felt like bishop e4, f5 was not what he should be doing. I really felt like he should be, like, taking and trying to play against this pawn. And actually, I think what he overlooked is maybe, like, knight e5, d e5. He actually can go here. Two things are hanging, but if bishop d4, there's bishop c5, which I guess he missed. Admittedly, I missed it too. He can just leave the queen because he pins my bishop to my own king. So he doesn't take his chance. He plays bishop e4. And now I'm like, wait a minute. Hello. He's just given me a target. So he's given me new life, right? So now if he takes on e5, it's great. I mean, I'm going to take on e6. Not right now, but at least when the queen comes in, I'll take check and everything can fall. I'll take everybody. So queen g4, he really didn't like it. He moved his really active rook to a passive square. And the second I saw this, I knew it was my time to go, so I immediately ran into a6. I mean, you gotta go. It seems like the momentum of the game is absolutely shifting. We both maybe have 50 seconds on the clock, so now it's about, like, what's gonna happen? Can I find a way in here? He takes on e5. Very important decision here by white to take like this. I have to open up my bishop. Have to open up my bishop and potentially get in to c5, d6. If I play like this, I just let him kind of weaken my king. There's all sorts of tactics on my king now, maybe down the f-file. So I said, no, let's take like this. But now here comes knight a5, and I still have some problems. I have knight c4, queen c3 to deal with. So I think this is a pretty decent way to solve both those problems. And I'm still maybe threatening f5. I mean, he plays knight c4, queen a6. And at this point, I'm sitting there and I'm going, oh man, this looks really nice. I'm going to get into b7. Maybe even to b8. I've got g7 threats, but I realize as I'm sitting there that Alexei can play knight d2, which I just, like, it looks like I have a really strong initiative coming, but he has knight d2, which attacks my rook and threatens knight f3. I really do not want a knight that close to my king. I really don't. If I play rook b7 now, he can play just simple g6. Maybe he was only looking at rook f7, at which point I would take, queen h5, and I'm getting in. Because if g6, I have this. If this, I have this. If this, we opened up our king a long time ago, right? And if king e7, I just assume I'm winning after something like bishop c5, queen d7. So he has to go knight d2, but it's really hard to find that, you know, with seconds on the clock. And he plays rook f7. Rook f7 surrenders control of his back rank. Rook b8. I'm like, wait a minute. I'm creating some very serious problems here for him. He cannot take on b8. If he takes on b8 and lets me go like this, I just thought I was winning. Turns out I'm not. Turns out that after this, somehow I'm not winning this position after queen h4 with all these threats, because the engine finds a way to defend it. But it looked really nice. And he thought for some time here and played queen to a4. And that loses. And that loses because the queen has surrendered control of this pawn, which looks uncapturable, but it is because the rook is occupied on the 8th rank. So my rooks protect each other, and now queen e6, and it's over. It's just over because rook b8 is game over. You cannot move this rook at all. If you play king f8, the whole reason we opened up the bishop a while ago, bishop c5. And that's why a long time ago I played de5 so I could play bishop c5 and come in here with my bishop. And Alexei resigned because it's all mate. It's all mate. Queen e7 is a nice finishing touch. Can also be really savage and play queen f8, which is really nice, and it's just a smothered mate in the corner. So got a win over Alexei Serrano, which is completely crazy. 29.50 at the time of the game. Alexei ended up beating me 2.5, 1.5. I was playing another game with white, and I was totally winning in that game. But as it would have it, he held on and defended a very, very tough endgame. And I was only winning in that game because of a crazy tactic. So I didn't see the crazy tactic, as we've seen throughout this video. Sometimes they get overlooked. But hey, I can't complain getting 1.5 out of 4 against Alexei Serrano. And we will end with V Pranav, who I played recently in Title Tuesday, and I was really happy with this game. This was a super nice game that I played. He was 3002 at the time of the game, he's 3003 live. So he played a weird sideline of the Caro-Kann, like an advanced Caro-Kann with knight e2. The point of this is if black plays bishop f5, you're gonna play like knight d4 or knight g3, and you just get to the bishop before committing a pawn move. Now, sometimes what I do here to prevent knight g3 is I play h5, h4. It looks really hilarious, but this knight doesn't find a comfortable home if it's on e2. It doesn't really want to be on f4. It doesn't really do something there. Plus, it can always walk into g5. So I like to play like this. Pranav believed me, and he played h3. And now we just play a normal advanced Caro-Kann, but the bishop is on f5, and there's no knight g3. And this comes from experience of playing the Caro-Kann for, like, you know, a long time. 10 years, 12 years, whatever. So c5, and we have a pawn break. And now we're going to have a very interesting battle for the d4 square. So he's going to put a knight on d4 at some point. And I am actually going to give him my light squared bishop. I hit the mic. If that made a noise, I'm sorry. So I'm going to give him my light squared bishop. If he takes on f5, then I am now actually winning the battle for the d4 square. My bishop on b6 is really strong, and I'm actually pretty happy with the position. He plays a4, looking to get my bishop. I play a6, so that a5, I just come back. And he trades light squared bishops with me, but I didn't like that decision by him. So that's a structural mistake that he made. Actually, it's funny. This position is like plus 0.6 for white. This position is minus 0.6 for black. A full 1 point eval swing. Oh, not 1 point, but like, you know, a mirror image, so 1.2. So knight d7, and why? Why is that? Well, my light squared bishop was like a prized possession of my position, but I was trying to give it up for full center control, activating my bishop. His light squared bishop was supposed to be the difference maker. So if he took and played bishop d3, this is now going to be his best piece. That piece is the difference of our positions. But now that he's traded it, I'm happy, and I can continue to make him make pawn moves to guard his center and start winning the battle for these light squares. Actually, h5, h4 now comes in handy because the really weakened g3 square as well, right? So normally the pawns can go together. So what comes next? I play knight c5, looking to trade. We trade, and now bishop e3. I decide now to get a bishop versus knight middle game. He plays bishop b6, and I'm actually now going to create an initiative on this side of the board as well. So Pranav castles queenside. I go here, threatening that I might repeat moves. He doesn't want to, and I play rook c8. King b1, and now rook g6. Rook d2, and I play king f8. I play king f8 because I don't want any of this nonsense, so I actually just take a moment in the middle of this game to walk over, and we see the problem with his position. I played h5, h4 a long time ago and I've won the battle for this kind of area of the board. Because he had to play f4, e5, his structure has been locked. He lost that battle of the structure, so now none of his pawns can move. Actually, literally, 4 of his pawns can't move at all. The 5th will not move, and these 2 would weaken his king. So, if you cannot make any pawn moves, you've lost. Like, the game is over. If I can make pawn moves and piece moves combined, and I can hunt down the pawns that you can't move, I win. Right? If we totally lock the structure, it's a draw. But this is not a locked structure. I've won the battle for the open square. So the question is, how are we going to win this position? Well, we have to begin with queen a4. It's the best move. It monitors everything about the position. It applies tremendous amounts of pressure to all empty squares. If we do a spatial count of a space advantage here, who controls what squares on the opponent's side of the board? It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 for white. And for black, oh my god, 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, obviously these 2 with the knight. How many with the rook? I mean, it's unbelievable. You can pause and count here, but it's a lot. It's a lot of squares, and that queen is really doing an important job. And immediately Pranav makes a mistake. He goes for a queen trade, f4 falls. Once f4 falls, it's time to sound the alarms. Rook e2, I decide to just bring my queen back and just trade queens. Computer isn't loving it. It thinks that I could be more ruthless, but let's just get the queens off the board. And now a very clean move, in my opinion, knight e3. If he comes back, he's going to lose this pawn, but he doesn't. So he allows me to now attack 4 things with my knight. And after bishop d4, I'm now up 2 pawns. It's just time to scoop everything up, and disaster strikes with rook d4. He plays this, and I could defend my knight. He can't take, but I decide to just come back. Fork, pick this up. We're 3 pawns up in a rook endgame, and we have to convert it. We have to not get mated on the back rank. We have to push our pawns. The game ends with Pranav winning a couple of my pawns, but the easiest thing to do here, this is the easiest way to win this position. Put your rook on a square it's defended and cut the king off. Do not let the king touch the pawn, and when you're ready, put the pawn forward, put the rook behind the pawn, and you want to isolate your enemy rook on some square as far to the back row as possible, because then you can just start pushing another pawn. So it doesn't matter. If you're up 4 pawns, he can win this one. It makes no difference because you have 3 more pawns, right? So sometimes you don't. Sometimes you have to be more accurate, but this is the cleanest way to win it. Don't go checking. You don't need to win all his pawns. Rook behind the pawn and just keep pushing. To be honest, I was 2-2 with Pranav, which was nuts. And then he disconnected, so it was 3-2. He came back, he beat me twice. But I went 3 out of 7 versus this guy who's like unbelievably strong. He beats Hikaru sometimes. So it was an awesome day of chess. A couple days ago, I got up to 2,800, which I haven't been in probably this entire year, basically, like 9 months since I was 2,800 last. So it's paying off. I wanted to share these games with you. And listen, I know that most of these players, these IMs and these GMs, they spend all day online. That kind of makes them sound like they have like no life or something. That's not what I'm trying to say. What I mean to say is they play hundreds of blitz games every day. So for them, it's not really a big deal to beat up on some of these players, and they're constantly going back and forth. For me, it kind of is a big deal because I've never really beaten 29 and 3000s. Like I just never beaten them. I kind of beat up the 27s and the 28s, but I will tell you one thing. So much of it is a mindset thing for me. Like I couldn't break past 2730 for a long time, and when I did and I got to 2800, my ceiling got higher. And I said, there's no way I can be below 2,600 anymore. Like, if I'm 2,600, I gotta be 2,700. So when you shift your own perception of your own ability, your ceiling goes up. And that's kind of what's been happening. I feel like I can compete against these guys, and I'm just playing each game, like, actively, aggressively, trying to play for a win. And even though I'm kind of getting nervous down the stretch a little bit, it's paying off. So, hope you enjoyed the video. Peace out. Get out of here.